Hello, this is Terry Tyson, and you're listening to the Successful Mentalist Podcast.
That's right, it's the Successful Mentalist. Of course, my name's Ashley Green, and I'm joined by the wonderful Aidan O'Sullivan. But Aidan, who are we joined with today on the Successful Mentalist Podcast?
We are joined by none other than the fantastic, the man, the myth, the legend himself, that is Terry Tyson. Now, Terry came into the TSM world quite a while back, and we've known of him a little bit longer than that, and we're just big fans of the work that Terry's actually got going on. We knew that it was only a matter of time before we invited him into the show to actually come and share some of his insights with us. Again, we were talking just a few minutes before we started recording today, and our minds were already blown by some of the stuff that Terry was sharing. So, Terry, welcome to the TSM podcast. It's so good to have you on board.
Thank you so much. And I do question your judgment about interviewing me. Because I'm just a guy. I'm just a guy. This is what I do. And it's not all that I do. That's the other thing that we'll talk about in a bit. But it's really nice, guys. I appreciate the time.
We sure will. But, well, that's been the podcast. We'll keep this one nice, short and sweet today. So it's good that you're here. We'll wrap up now and we'll see you a bit. No,
time for coffee.
Yeah, easy. Productivity. Cut your podcast down, get them on, say hi, then bugger off. But no, before we go into today's podcast, for anyone and those fools out there, those awful, awful fools who are listening, who haven't heard of what you do, can you give us a brief summary into your world, into your entertainment career, and what you do in general for those people who might not have heard of you before?
Sure. I have a business that I started after I retired. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. It was just before I retired. Because I was a safety professional for 35 years and actually parlayed that into my business now. And it's kind of nice to be able to not have to worry about paying rent doing this. But I have a speaking, it's called Insight Services and Presentations. And I do public speaking, I do workshop facilitation, and I do shows, both mentalism as well as seance shows. And most people might know me if they've read the literature for my seance stuff. And but that's the business. And it takes me all over the world, all over the country. I've performed on cruise ships for Viking. I speak at conferences in Las Vegas, Dallas, Baltimore, you name it. And this business that I've started has allowed my wife and myself to see a lot of really neat things. And the business supports that. And I think that we'll touch on this maybe now or later. But what's very important is, as I see this as a side business, because my main focus in life is to live. I love to truck about and hike, kayak on the ocean and in whitewater. I used to teach climbing as a young man, but I'm a little bit older than that, as are my needs. I love to cook. I like to write. I like to garden, and I love superhero movies. I like taking my mom to superhero movies because she loves them. She's hard of hearing, so she doesn't have to really see dialogue. She doesn't have to hear dialogue. She can see what's happening. And she has a major crush on Thor. Every movie that we go to, she goes, "Is Thor going to be in this one?" "No, Mom." "Oh, okay. Well, we can still go." But yeah, I have this amazing life outside of magic. But magic has been a very important part of my life, but I don't define myself by my magic. I define myself about who I interact with, who are my friends, what meal did I cook yesterday from a new recipe, or what amazing hike did I go on, and photography. I love photography as well. And I also love art. I make art. I teach art and craft classes here in my studio we're at right now, and have done that even on cruise ships before I started doing magic on cruise ships. So that's an important part of my life. But yeah, I don't define myself, Ashley, by well, what kind of magic do you do? Well, this is what I do. But this is also what I do. When I get to meet new magicians, one of the first things I start asking them about is, what do you do when you're not magicking? because that tells me a lot about people. Jeff and Tess Evison have become friends, and not because they're great performers. It's because they are just incredibly beautiful people. They're really, really nice. And I see that James Scott here is joining us, and James has become a friend. But when we had chats, it's not just about magic. Some of it is esoteric topics, his interest in strange things and our strange things, and also talk about, recipes and such. And to me, that frankly is more important to me than how good of a magician they are. I think, especially young magicians, they get tied up that, oh man, I want to be the best magician. And that's great. It's great. But at the cost of everything else, that is really terrible. And I think one way you can look at it is look at the biographies of musicians and, professional actors, and what kind of life did they have. And you'll find that the most balanced of those have varied interests. There are many, many actors. Who is it? Gene Hackman. He's doing painting. That's very, very important to him. He loves to paint. He doesn't act anymore, but he loves to paint. And other actors and musicians and such, other artists have these incredible interests that feeds their soul. In addition to perhaps put some money in their pocket where they're doing magic or music or acting, they have these great things that they do that does indeed feed their soul. And I've adopted a stance that I have a business that I don't want to work too hard. Otherwise it's a 9 to 5 and it becomes drudgery, and I'm going to hate the magic. I did the 9 to 5 and I loved my job. I really did. It was in, like I said, environmental health and safety. And I know I did good work, but I don't have to do it 9 to 5 any longer. And it's very, very nice to have that luxury. And the magic has provided the extra income to be able to do the really nice things in life and to go on trips and things of that nature. So anyway, that's the long answer. I still write for magic. I still write for the magazines. I did early in my career and stopped doing it for a while and lost touch with the magic community and lost touch with my magic because frankly, I think this was some maturity on my part, I didn't like the guy that I became. And I think, Ashley, you and I talked about this previously, privately, that, did the magic and was doing pretty good. I was able to pay rent doing it. It was a lot of hustle and a lot of work. And then I began to believe my own publicity, and I became somewhat of a jerk, sort of an ass, actually. And through a failed relationship, frankly, the mirror was held up to me. I thought, I don't like this guy, and walked away from magic for several years and then crawled back, and I'm glad I did. But I come back knowing full well that I will never, ever, ever again define myself by what kind of magic that I do. So I think that's so important, guys, and like I said, these young magicians, they get so tied up. Oh, I want to be the next David Copperfield. Okay. That's great. I don't want to dash anybody's dreams, but out of the millions of magicians, there's going to be only one David Copperfield. So what are you going to do with life? How are you going to define yourself? By just your magic? And if that's the case, then you might take a look in the mirror and say, what is important to me? What relationships are important to me? How is my health? What's my mental health? What's my spiritual health? All of those things have to come into play to be a fully formed person. And if you don't do that, you're going to end up kind of miserable, and you're going to feel like you're a complete failure if you don't become the David Copperfield. So yeah, That's the long and short of it. I look at other things besides magic.
Oh, I love that. That's so important. You've hit a few things there that I really want to pick up on, but I suppose the most important element is that, Terry, you're interested in an awful lot of things there. There's probably more things that you just reeled off through that conversation there that you're interested in that people will be in a lifetime. So I'd love to know what is the role of passion in all of these different things? Are you truly passionate about all of these things, or are they things that you're just mildly interested in, or just do for the sake of doing?
No, I'm passionate about all of those things, and because of that, how do I say this? Okay, so my speaking and my workshops and all of my corporate work keeps me pretty busy. But I've found that I'll get a bunch of workshop gigs or speaking gigs, and the magic goes down a little bit, and then those trail off. And then the magic comes back. So and I'm not in control of a lot of that. It just happens because I'm very lazy when it comes to marketing and things of that nature. But it's nice to have, okay, I'm not getting very many workshops. That's okay, because I'm going to learn 3 recipes. So I just try to do that balancing game all the time. And I don't know if it's my intentions that I send out to the universe, that I want to stay busy and engaged, because I'm not a young man anymore. I know that I have a finite number of tomorrows, and I don't want to waste any day, even if my day is to sit on my butt and enjoy a book. I go into every day with focus and intention and say, what interests me today, or what do I want to work on today? And I might have planned that out, in the calendar for a few weeks ahead of time, but I've got something that will engage me and something that will keep this fire burning. And so I just stoke it, and I like to learn, and I read and things of that nature.
This is, I would argue, one of the greatest lessons that people can learn from this podcast and learn from you straight away today, because you said there, you see so many young people striving to be the next David Copperfield. I see so many young magicians and some who are slightly older than me doing it professionally, and their diaries are just, here's a gig, here's a load of travel, here's another gig, here's a gig, and they're so busy that by the time the weekend comes around, they're like, I better... finally I get to sit down. But no, it's a weekend, so I've got loads more gigs. And in their eyes, they're like, I'm successful, I'm doing it, I'm doing everything I want. But I don't see that as true, and it's not sustainable. And eventually, I think those people are going to hit a point where they just burn out and crash, and they stop being passionate about magic and they walk away from magic. And I think they really need to take a step from your book and actually start living life on the outside. And this is what we talk about a lot. And you've touched on the word hustle there. People get trapped up in this hustle mentality, thinking it's good to hustle away and work, when in reality, all 3 of us, and I think James and Gordon watching live know that as well, hustle mentality doesn't work. You just end up, again, hitting burnout, losing touch with your passions, and it's just not good for your health and mental health and life overall. And that's one of the things I really, really appreciate you sharing straight away off the bat. Live life outside of magic, live life outside of business, and actually do things and do things that you want to do. And I just want to say thank you for making that so clear and obvious for people that they need to get out there and live the lives that they want to live and try new things that they want to do and learn recipes and go on walks and hikes and surfboarding. So thank you for being so upfront and sharing this, Terry.
Oh, thank you. Well, sure. Because I've done the other, again, Ashley, in our earlier conversation, I was hustling and I was able to make rent. I was able to eat every day. But man, after a while, I was just a one-trick pony. That's all I did. Well, what do you do otherwise? Well, I used to hike. I used to climb. I used to do this, and I used to have, do you cook? No, because I'm too busy in the evenings doing gigs, and again, it was because of a failed relationship that I had to hold the mirror up and realized that I needed to I had to go back and find who I was again. Who was I before I really got busy with magic? Who was that person? And hell, just make a list. Say, what did you do? What was important to you? What did you do when you weren't cooking? Well, I was reading. Or when you're hiking, or I take my camera. And what I've found is that becoming a well-rounded person, and it just occurred to me, this is what makes a really good mentalist. Because if you're all about learning methods and routines, and that, it's smart. You got to rehearse. You've got to practice, et cetera, et cetera. But unless you're out there living life, meeting people and interacting with people that aren't magicians, there's only like 10 magicians that I really like to spend any time with. And, otherwise it's like, oh God, these guys, oh, they're boring me. It's, so anyway, by getting out there and doing things other than magic, you find out that people that don't do magic are pretty entertaining, and they're pretty great, and they have great stories, and they have a life that is unlike yours. And you need to find out about that so that when you do your next gig and you meet somebody like Joe you met at the last gig, and you're going to do, let's say, a reading, I'm going to do a cold reading for this fellow. And unless you have met the Joes, you're not going to be able to interact with the Bills or the Marys, because you'll be, if you don't have those experiences and that so forth, it's really going to fail. For instance, it's doing a cold reading for a fellow, and it was at the end of a gig. It was just last week. I had a gig at a winery. I mean, that's the best of all worlds, doing a show at a winery, for goodness sakes. Boy, what's wrong with that picture? Nothing. And cleaning out my stuff, this guy came and he goes, "Hey, can we talk for a bit?" Yeah. And he says, "I'm really interested in this, what you do. It's fascinating." And he said, "Can you read my mind?" And I used the Luc Germain line. It says, "Well, rather than tell you, I'd rather show you," And I started doing a routine that I created using ESP cards, but I don't use them as ESP symbols, but use them as icons that they can concentrate on, and you assign a meaning to the icon, and that, look at those symbols, assign a meaning. And I give some examples. The star could be that you like being out in nature and look at the sky, or I want to be successful and have the star on my door. And then this circle. And again, this is sort of, old stuff. People have been doing this for a while. The circle is perhaps the complete universe, et cetera, et cetera. He chooses one, puts it down on the table. I said, "Okay, let's talk a minute about this symbol." And of course I knew which one he picked. So I used that as the jumping off point, because it was 3 wavy lines, and I could tell this guy was pretty fit. I'm thinking, okay, that has to do with the ocean or the out of doors, as opposed to bacon, and I started talking about that, and I could tell I was getting some hits about the out of doors. And I started thinking about because I used to surf, but I'm too old, and I was a bloody mess at the end of every surfing thing. And this was when I lived on the ocean, and we started talking about the ocean. And then I said, "When you were young, did you live here?" I asked him, "Did you live in Southern California?" "Yeah, I thought so." "Did you like to hike? Because I see you outdoors as well, not just on the ocean." "Yes." And then I said, "Wait a minute, I see you hiking to a peak." And it went into, there's a local peak that is like, hikers like to check that one off the box. "And I see you on the top of Mount San Jacinto. Does that make sense?" He goes, "How in the world did you know that?" And it's because I've met Joes, and I've, talked to myself, and I've met everybody outside of doing magic, and use that information for successful cold readings and just good interactions with people. a good gig is, for me, I would say maybe the balance is off a little bit, but it's 80% performance and 20% just talking to the people and getting to know them and just interacting with them. It's just not all the magic. It's just not all the mentalism or whatever. You get to know people, and they really, at the end of the day, he's a really nice guy because he was interested in me. I sucked this information in. He was interested in me. It wasn't all about how fancy his card shuffles were or whatever. So, so I structure all of my gigs around allowing the audience or the participants do most of the work. And I think that's important. Don't forget about your audience. Just keep them in mind and let them talk. Let them talk a lot. Let them talk a whole bunch. I was hired at this winery it was just an hour gig. It was a meet and greet reception for a local magazine that had advertisers, and they brought these folks into the winery. And I was there for about 2 hours, because, it's an hour gig. You got to set up a little bit. And I only did my set 3 times. That's all I did. I didn't have to do it over and over because I hate roving magician work. It's really, really freaking hard. I would set up on a table off the side, and nobody was coming. So I walked around, and hi, I'm here. I'm the entertainment tonight, and started drawing them in. That brought them in. And I only did my set 3 times. The rest of the time is just yakking and getting to meet really interesting people.
I think that's really important. You've picked up on something there that is it's crucial. I wouldn't even say it's really useful to be in order to be a good mentalist or even just a good magician, to understand people. I would argue that is perhaps the most important rule in the book. Like you can't entertain people without understanding people on at least some fundamental level. Like anybody that knows me knows that I love obviously studying psychology just because that's a personal interest, but it goes beyond the psychology. It's understanding human thought process, human behavior in general, but also transcending that even further out to just wider reading in any subject whatsoever, and actually being able to understand those and meet the people behind it. It's one of the reasons we do this podcast and we're building the TSM community, is because it's not just a great opportunity to connect with people like yourself, Terry, but it's a great opportunity to just meet all of those Joes and the Bills and the Marys and all of these amazing people out there that can, again, serve us in this whole hidden way that we don't necessarily pay as much attention as we should. And I really want to just reflect this point here that James has put in the chat here. When we was talking a few minutes ago about passion, he's put, Terry's passion is contagious. Whenever I speak with him directly or hear him speak, I find myself motivated to follow my passions both inside and outside of mentalism. And I feel exactly the same way right now, James. I genuinely do. This is amazing. We need to spend more time with you, Terry. That's what we're saying here. But
oh, well, anytime.
But what's really important about this is that, again, this sounds like the life of luxury. This sounds like the dream. You're doing amazing gigs at amazing places. You're enjoying life. It's brilliant. You must do a lot to make this happen, but we've established you don't.
No.
In fact, you described yourself as the lazy semi-professional to us, which was perfect when summarizing this whole project. Could you dissect that a little bit more? Where do we begin on that?
Well, let's go to the beginning of how I got back into magic, because I thought that entry was healthier psychically, spiritually, and physically than when I first started doing it. Because first time I did it the typical thing. I'm hustling, I'm calling, I'm doing all these things and selling myself over and over and over again, 20 times to get half a gig, and I find that approach soul crushing. I know a lot of guys, and I know Ken Dine, for instance. Ken is brilliant at that approach. And he's got these things set up, that it's automatic this and whatnot, and does cold calls and things of that nature. And I can't do it that much because it's not interesting. I find it soul crushing, and very difficult. I use a lot of things that Ken does to sell myself. But I started in my business, and again, I was in environmental health and safety. And environmental health and safety, they probably have a bazillion conferences all over the country and all over the world. And because I was good at my job, I knew how to communicate well and teach and do workshops, that I started doing, we'll call them speaking engagements at these conferences. You don't get paid generally. Sometimes you get a conference fee taken care of, or you're going to get a comped dinner. But I'm already working, and it's already in my field. So I'm going to be there anyway. So why not do something and share some ideas that I've got about how to make a workplace safer, or how to motivate employees, or whatever it may be. How leadership is one of my big topics. And so I started getting, speaking engagements. Like, yes, Terry, you're going to lead this workshop on improving this is the first one, improving your observation skills for safety. And I tossed in a magic trick, and that's a natural topic. Now, I can fool your eyes, and if I can fool your eyes, then you're going to miss something out there that's going to kill you. So be careful, and blah, blah, blah. And it was like, oh, that was really nice. We really liked that. He had a great message, and he kept us engaged with a little bit of magic. Started doing that over and over again. And again, I'm not making much money at the conference because they're not paying me, but it's part of a trade association that I belong to. So I'm going to be there anyway. That started to parlay into outside gigs, saying, Terry, we have a company function. We'd like you to come and speak at this. Is it okay with your boss? Sure. It's either going to be a vacation day, a holiday, or it's going to be on the weekend or something. And again, I'm working full time at this point, and I'm in the corporate world, and I was a corporate director. So I had a lot of freedom in that regard. And that turned into outside speaking gigs. And then they said, I really like the magic. Do you do shows? I go, yeah, I do shows. Or I might have mentioned it to somebody. I did a show last week. I really didn't, but I did a show last week. And it was really fun. And just dropping the hint that I perform. So that started to create the perfect gig for me, which is keynote speaker in the morning on the first day of the conference, lead a workshop on the second day in the afternoon, and then performing for the final conference dinner as their entertainment. Boom, boom, 3 boxes. When you start doing that, they will pay you, and especially for the entertainment part, because this other stuff is work related. But here's this entertainment thing, if I played music, you'd pay me. If I sang, you'd pay me. So yeah, this is what I charge. And I didn't charge a lot, but I made sure that I got compensated for my time. That then begins to snowball. And that is where they say it's word of mouth. It's not from my mouth, it's from other people's mouths that, and they start coming to me. Say, yeah, we had Tyson. He came out and did our training on the weekend. He's really good. Or we saw Tyson perform at XYZ conference. That guy was great, and he was entertaining, or whatever the word may be. Not funny, because I'm not a funny guy. I'm not a comedy magician. I don't make it super serious, but I make sure they have fun and they're mystified, et cetera, et cetera. that's how this whole thing started. And I became the lazy semi-professional after I quit full-time work. I had a business model. I had the website. My business model is I have different silos in which I can draw from. I can draw from the speaking. I can draw from the workshops, on-site training and consulting, and the magic mentalism. And so when one silo goes kind of dry, I can switch over to here, and I keep my eye open. I still belong to these trade associations. As an associate member, as a business owner, I belong to these organizations, and I go to their conferences, speak at their conferences. And again, it's sort of self-perpetuating after a while. And, I rarely do very much hustling, except for the seance show during we're opening next weekend. And I think I mentioned that almost all the shows are sold out. And that's very exciting. Now, I did have to do a little bit of hustling there, but not a lot. I just knew some community members. We got kicked out. My buddy Matt and I were going to do the seance at the Mystic Museum in Burbank. We got kicked out because the guy could rent the place for $1 bazillion for this motion picture company to come in, because it's just a beautiful setting for this kind of thing. And we'll have you back in November. Okay, thanks, Eric, but understand. And I just mentioned it on Facebook, my local community Facebook page. And they said, well, why don't you do it here? Okay, why not? And this person knew this person, and this is how you get this venue. And I talked to the person who has the venue, and they're not charging us any rent because it's a community event where the local, and this is a planned development that we live in. Say if you could open up your tickets for the first week to exclusively the residents of our small community, and then give them first dibs, first refusals, then we could open it up later for the larger expanding Southern California community. Handshake, I gave them the insurance document, and then I started hustling as far as getting the word out and talking about it and putting postings on my website as well as on social media. And everywhere I turned, I printed up the posters for the show that you can see back there, had a couple, hey, are you interested, to hang this in your shop? No. Okay. Well, here's my card. Here I have these little postcards that are sort of miniature versions of the poster. Here's the website. If you want to get some tickets, let me know. And tell you what, if you come with 6 people, I'll let you in for free. And, okay. So, there's at each show, there's one person that is comped, but they brought 6 of their friends. And that's why the show is almost sold out. Like the last night we have like 12 seats open. That's it. So anyway, that's sort of my business model. It's pretty self-sufficient. I don't hustle too much. And so here's the other thing. When I don't have a gig, when I have some free weeks, it's the best thing ever. Susan and I are going to go hiking. We're going to visit friends in Arizona or whatever, and we sort of look at that, and we have a shared calendar where I can put things in. And, so it's great. Because again, I don't define myself just by my mentalism and seance work. I define myself by all these other things that are pretty great, So being a good husband, for instance, I define myself as being a good partner in life with my wife, and that to me is better than anything in the world. But anyway, so I know I'm rambling. I'm sorry. Get me going.
It's a beautiful perspective shift that you have there. Like, most magicians, when they don't have a gig on for like a few weeks, they go, oh my gosh, and stress about it. But your perspective is, hey, I've got all of this time, and time is our most valuable asset, and I can use this to focus on the things that I really want to do and the things that I'm passionate about. And, one of the things that I've really noticed from what you're saying, it seems like there's a borderline kind of philosophy as well of just simplicity all throughout this to keep it as simple as possible.
Yeah. If it wasn't for if I had solid bookings time and time again, and to some that would be, a dream. But if I didn't have the extra time now and again, I would never have got to meet James Scott through some Zoom meetings for, our groups. Wouldn't have met this guy. And James actually had a bigger influence on the seance than he might realize, because the seance has a lot of stuff that James shared or actually reiterated that this stuff works. Terry, try this. And Wendy Wild, for instance, same thing. By my association with them, the seance became better. But if I was booked solid time and time again, and I'm out there hustling, I wouldn't have time to interact with these, amazing folks. So, yeah, keep it simple. Again, unless you want to truly do it full time and you go into it with your eyes extremely wide open, for me, I don't want my magic to become so onerous that I stop liking it. Because, again, other artists, other musicians and actors and stuff, if they do other things or they do it with different people, you have a band, for instance, 4 members, and they interact with these guys and it's all this. But the most successful bands that have been together for the longest time break apart a little bit. They have distance between them. And this guy is friends with somebody else. And I'm going to sit in with this band at this gig or whatever. So it's not just this one very small bubble that they do. They go outside that bubble now and again. And I think it's healthy. I really do. And yeah, so unless you guys, don't beat yourself up if you don't get the gig, or that, you meet somebody and you see they're doing lots of shows, but then you find out they have a day job. That is not uncommon. And people you thought were full-time professionals, not necessarily. They also sell insurance, or they do other kinds of things that puts beans on the table. And then the magic puts the champagne on the table, and, that's okay. That's great. I always love to hear what people do besides magic, even people that I had, naively thought were full time. And that's all they did. No, they do other things. This is, I also sell insurance. Oh, cool. Where? What kind of product do you get? That's fascinating to me. And there we go. Again, I tend to ramble and I apologize.
Not at all. Honestly, there's so much wisdom being shared right now, Terry. And again, I know that I'm speaking on behalf of probably everybody in this Zoom call right now, that the wisdom you're sharing is just, it's making me sit and reflect as you're talking. And actually, there's very few people that I've met and who have heard talk about this kind of stuff so calmly and just so clearly, in a way that I can literally sit and think, this just makes sense. Yeah, what have I missed? It's not what am I doing wrong, but what are the opportunities to make this more fun, to take the pressure off of my own shoulders, to calm down a bit and just enjoy what life is. I mean, heck, still incredibly young if you look at the scale of things, but the concern is still the same. It's like time, there is a finite number of mornings, and as you so wonderfully put, and it's just so important to capitalize on that. I mean, hopefully this episode is helping people to wake up and to see this whole new world of this. I don't want to call it a new age of magic, but I really feel like it's becoming that way, of actually using magic to achieve that life that we actually should be living. Not just want, but the life that we deserve and we should be actually living. I think that's so important. And James has popped a comment again earlier. I do want to read this one out as well because it really emphasizes the point. So it's really a 4-person podcast. You should come and join us, James. This would be so much easier. But Terry made a very important point about being more than just a magician or a performer at an event. I did a strolling gig over the weekend where I worked for almost 4 hours and only did my set a handful of times. The rest of the time, I was just talking to the guests about them and their lives. I got a review on Facebook this morning from the woman who hired me and stated that aside from being good at my job as an entertainer, I was kind, friends, and just a pleasure to be around. That says it all,
Yes,
right?
It does.
That says it all.
And James is a nice person to be around. I can tell. We have not met in the flesh, as it were. We got close in Baltimore. But in April, my friend, I'll see you, James, in April, in Baltimore. So, yeah. And you could tell just by talking to James, he's a nice guy. And that's the kind of people I want to hang out with. You know, that's the kind of person that I want to have a cocktail with at the end of the day, or just chat with a cup of coffee in the morning at the hotel where the conference is or whatever. Yeah. So guys, you know, if you're into magic, you know, it's beautiful. It is taking me literally across the world and all over the country. And I never would have thought that I'd be able to do these things. And I probably wouldn't have been able to do it without having this thing that we do, this mentalism, without it. And I'm grateful to magic and mentalism and seance work and all of that for this, but also grateful because I got to go to the Grand Canyon because of it. You know, that's the cool thing, you know, that kind of thing. So yeah, don't become a full person. And I mean full in the sense of spiritually rounded out. You know, I'm not talking about religion, you know, but educated too. Read books. Take the time. One of the things I always tell young magicians, because I taught a class at university, it was an extension course on magic years ago. And one of the assignments that I gave them was to write a poem. Now, what? Write a poem, you know, find out what the meter is. And this is their assignment. And what it did is it took them out of learning the back palm into discovering something else. And it helped them be better speakers. It helped them to interact with words and things of that nature and cadence of speech or whatever they got out of the lesson. And a couple of guys said, well, I wrote a poem. Cool. And I set it to magic. Perfect. Let's see what you do, you know? And so it got them, it sparked some creativity in them to become their own, you know, get their own pattern. God, I hate that word, but their own script. Help them write their own script by writing a silly poem, you know? So anyway. Oh, I was going to tell you about the cruise ships, because, again, soft pedaling, soft approach. My wife and I are headed, fingers crossed, next year for 2 cruises. One will be from Budapest to Amsterdam. We get to come back to Amsterdam. I love that city. And then the other one is a bucket list trip because it's Israel and Egypt and Jordan. So bucket list, going to the city of Petra. The first river cruise that we went on, I wanted to make it a point that I performed on board. Didn't know a single person's name, got on board. We met some people. I did some magic. The program director came by. Oh, this is really fun. oh, show us, So and I did it for the bartender as well, like first 2 days. And talked to the program director. I said, I would love to put on a performance for our guests at sometime, while we're here. Oh, okay, sure. And we picked a night. And again, I'm going into it allegedly without compensation, and did it. It was successful. The program director came up to me and he said, your entire bar tab is going to be on the ship throughout the entire cruise. We're going to comp. That was really, really good. Thank you so much. And he told the bartender, put his account, put my name on it. We'll take care of it. Got his name. The next time we went on one, I had this program director's name and information. And we talked to the folks there at Viking and said, we're looking forward to the cruise. We had such a great time. On our last one, the program director was Jody. And Jody said that I should reach out to program director for this cruise because I did a show. Contact Jody. Again, we got a nice discount on our cruise, and got a free bar tab the entire time. And again, it's not hard, and it was kind of lazy. I didn't, because a lot of guys say, I got to work a cruise ship, and the money is okay on a cruise ship. You don't stay in nice rooms, but the cruise line subsidizes our trip now. And it's kind of nice. It's kind of nice. So anyway, that's my approach to getting booked on your first few cruises.
I love this. I love everything about what you're saying, because it's like, it seems so easy, and in reality it is, because you've chosen the simple path and you've opted to just living life and having fun. And that's why it all falls into place, because you're not just going down this rabbit hole of, I just want to do work. And I know James has put a question in which we're going to ask you in a second, but I have a question which I think might be relevant for those people who might be struggling listening to this episode, who might be caught up in their own heads, and then it's suddenly dawned to them and they've gone, I do need to start living life and doing more outside of magic. And for those people who are maybe struggling to find their passions and what they love outside, have you got any insight into what they can do to try and work out what to do within their life?
Yeah. I think the first place you go is into nature. If you live in the big city, get out of the big city, take the train, take a car, and get into nature. That does a lot of things. To me, that is my touchstone, is nature outside. And take a hike, take a walk, go to a lake and just sit and throw rocks at it and just walk around. And if you have the opportunity or can meditate while you're at that lake, meditate, because it'll clear your head a little bit. And you focus in on your breathing. My technique, the technique I learned was just breathing focus. And it calms the spirit, and nature is just good. And your mind will begin to think of wanting to come back and say, come back and do this. And then that process, that's where it starts. It starts with nature, and get out into nature, and the mind will settle down a bit, and if you meditate, great, do that as well. Do it in nature if you can. And that's where doors will begin to open, opportunities. And it is almost bloody magical the way it happens. Because you're going to meet someone and you're going to tell them, I had a great weekend. I went out to this place and it was beautiful. Have you ever been? Yeah, it was great. Oh, yeah. And then you strike up these conversations with people you meet, and you find out about them, and everybody that you know or meet knows somebody else, or they have a direct need for your services. Everybody. but you're not selling the product. You're just selling yourself, just like what a nice person I am. You're there to not sell the show, but to get them to know you. And then when they find out you do this amazing stuff, oh my goodness, really? Can you do that for us? Sure. I'll tell you what, I'm going to be at the winery. Come on down and grab a glass of wine and or whatever, or give them an opportunity to come see you. Or you say, why don't you bring me in for your daughter's birthday? She's turning 18. I'd love to do that. It'll cost you a drink tonight though, but I'll come and do it. So you got to do some free gigs. And you speak at different civic groups for the same thing. That's one of I forgot to mention that, is that civic groups, whether it's the Lions Club, the Odd Fellows, or whatever, they are sucking the well dry as far as content is concerned. And you just say, I want to do this for you. What's it going to cost us? Nothing. You got to do lots of free gigs, because that free gig where there's 20 to 50 people, there's 20 to 50 people that will eventually think of you and reach out to you or whatever, for something they need, and have a topic. We could talk. We should have another podcast someday about doing public speaking, tying in your magic into public speaking, because that is a whole different topic that we could talk about for 3 days. So you're going to talk on a topic, or you could say, I'm just going to do a show for you guys. And why? Well, I'm trying some new things out. Make up a silly reason. And I want you guys to see it's not going to cost you a dime. And I'll be there for, 15, 20 minutes, or as long as you like. And that begins to open up doors. But I always, like I said before, I always start out in nature. That's where I begin, sort of with no real purpose of just getting out. That helps me.
I mean, we've got complete sense across the board there. I think it's so important. Floki, my little puppy, agrees. No, it definitely is. I mean, nature is such a powerhouse. I mean, depending on what level you go, whether you just pay full attention to yourself in nature, or you look at the studies behind it that suggest that now just being in nature can actually rewire your actual brain in the way you think. Like, it's incredible. And I'm so glad that that's where you went straight to that. And Terry, we would love to have you back for at least another conversation at some point, that's for sure, because there is just so much that we can pull apart from speaking to James has put in a great question about structuring mentalism shows and presentations. Like, all of this stuff, we'd love to bring you back and have another deeper dive on that. If that would be okay with you, Terry, would you like to come back to the podcast?
Oh, okay, sure. Yeah, and I mean, my pleasure. I like you guys. I love you people. Very much so, and have had a nice private conversation with Ashley, and just thought, damn it, I wish I was his neighbor, wish we lived down the street. And we could talk about maybe after the season, I'd like to share, because a lot of mentalists want to get into seance work, and it's really fun. So we can talk about that sometime as well.
100% is something that I've had on my my quote unquote bucket list for a little while now. There's literally, you'll like this, there's literally a venue, maybe 10-15 minutes walk from me. It's an old jail, but it's literally in the dead center it's a square little castle, dead center of I'm in the process of trying to pick it up as a residency, but they're literally they're about to go into a 5-6 month renovation. So I'm like, this is right over the season I wanted to actually start using it. But Gordon's popped a note in the chat saying this has been an incredible podcast. It's so good to get this perspective. I will second that. I'm sure James will agree. Ashley agree. Terry, I would love to say that you agree, but you've said it, so I'm sure you agree. But with that said, Terry, where can people find you, follow you, support your work?
Oh, sure. The website is tysoninsight.com. So it's TYSONINSIGHT.com. That's my basic corporate page. And then I have a secret page And it's that address /the_secret_cabinet. And you go to that and you'll learn about the seance stuff, because I have to be somewhat careful about who knows that I do a lot of seances, because in the corporate world, especially because America is a very conservative country, and I have to be cautious about who knows that I do these, or that I do them and, oh, it's really fun, and I don't try to sell it to them the same way I would sell it at, say, at a new age shop or something, but but there's more stuff about the mind reading stuff. My show called Connections, which that's a whole theme that James touched on, and other things. So yeah, that's that. I'm on Facebook, and I have my business Facebook page, which I sort of ignore. It just talks about where I'm going to be when. That's fine. But it's Terry Tyson on Facebook with this old man and his beard, who's not Santa Claus. You'll see my face.
Not quite Santa, but 10 times as more amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here, Terry, sharing so many insights. You've blown my mind, blown Ashley's mind, blown James's mind, blown Gordon's mind, blown every listener across the 100+ countries that we've got listeners now. Thank you so much for being here, and we're looking forward to the very next conversation with you.